Hello, everybody. Today's review is going to be of a show called The A-List, which I gave a 4 out of 10 to, because I just found it very confusing right from the beginning, actually, kind of, to be completely honest with you. It seemed like the story couldn't really get a grasp on where exactly it wanted to go until almost the second season, I would say. So, but we will go over the cast list so I can talk about who does what and well, duh, I guess. I guess every character was kind of somewhat important, except for the ones that showed up for like maybe one or two episodes. But it seemed that they just tried to add almost too much into the show at certain points in time, and I was like, okay. At one point, it seems like it's just like a kind of like a rivalry between these two girls, and then all of a sudden, it's like this midsummer themed thing, and then they're having all these parties or whatever, and I was like, okay, what's really going on? And then all of a sudden it seemed like one of them wasn't really meant to be there, but she was. And yeah, it just got really confusing. And then there was like some sort of like killer that was after them in the forest, and there was some paranormal stuff in here. And yeah, it just seemed to be kind of like dragged all over the place. And then eventually it got to the point where the forest was alive and the plants were communicating with one another, and then the island was alive in the second season. And I was like, okay, what exactly is going on, and what exactly are we doing in the show here? Because it really is somewhat confusing as to like what kind of story they really want to go with. And then the second season seemed very different storyline from the first season, where they tried to say that like everything that happened on the island in the first season didn't actually really happen. And I was like, okay, are these like at one point I was like, is this going to be like Lost kind of thing where they end up all being dead and they didn't even realize that they were dead? But that wasn't exactly where they went with the show. But anyway, still very kind of confusing, and a lot of it seemed to be like they were trying to explain it throughout the show a little bit too much, and I was like, okay, this is getting even more confusing because now we're being pulled in another direction. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know where this show's going. So yeah, I got a 4 out of 10 for me because I was still kind of even lost near the end of the show, to be completely honest, as to who was the bad guy, who was the good guy, like who were we really supposed to be rooting for in the end? Because it almost seemed like everybody had done something wrong in the show, and they all kind of deserved, I guess, what they were getting in a sense. It was really weird. So we had Lisa Ambla Vanar as Mia, Ellen, sorry, Ellen, Ellie Duckles as Amber, Rosie Dyer as Alex, Jack Kane as Zach, Georgina Sadler as Petal, Benjamin Nugent as Harry, Eleanor Bennett as Jenna, sorry, Savannah Baker as Kaylee, Max Lohan as Luca, uh, Indiana Ryan as Midge, Jacob Dedman as Dev, uh, Cian Berry as Dave, Michael Ward as Brendan, Neka Oki as Megs, Byron Eastman as Fitz, Dylan Brady as Sam, Barnaby Tobias as who played Dev in the second season. So that was another whole thing that was really confusing. Uh, well, I guess I shouldn't really say that part was confusing. I guess that part kind of made a little bit more sense. And then Finty Williams, who played Dr. Shaw, who was Midge's and Amber's mom. So again, this is the part that I don't get. It's almost like so Amber was supposed to be like this extension of this character Midge, I guess, but with a little bit maybe less of her powers. So she had like a mind control sort of thing that she could use on all of the campers. And it seemed like in the beginning she was all against Mia, which I guess would have made sense because Midge died in the first, or Midge died before the first season, and none of them could remember even being on Peregrine Island the year before, I guess. So they had already been there before. They had been sent back without their memories, and it was because Amber had wiped all of their memories at Midge's funeral or a celebration of life or whatever they were trying to do there. I'm not exactly entirely sure. I guess they were having some sort of like celebration of life or funeral for Midge. And then Amber comes along and wipes all their memories and makes them forget. And then, everybody says they're crazy and so on and so forth. But I guess they just ended up going back and being trapped on this island. Now, how they got back there, I don't know, because they have no recollection or memory of how they even got there this time around. And they seem to be having visions periodically, but Amber never sleeps. And when she does sleep, it shows what happened previously on the island with them. So a lot of them were together, like in couples. Um, I believe, yeah, so Mia was with Dev, and then Zach and was it Zach and Kaylee that were together? Yeah, and then there were a couple other people that ended up together, and then out of all odds, I think it was Harry and was it Harry and Jenna that ended up at together. I think they mentioned it at the very end of the show, and this was, of course, after all of the events had taken place, right? So we started on this Peregrine Island. Amber starts controlling everybody's mind after like this Midsummer event, and I was like, okay, is this going to be like kind of like similar to Midsummer where there's like a sacrifice or something? But that wasn't really the case at all, I guess. Um, and again, it seems to be this whole thing where Amber's controlling all of their minds. Then some of them are able to break free of it, and some of them can't be controlled because Amber's powers aren't strong enough. So again, um, she was supposed to be like an extension of Midge, and then we find out as this paranormal stuff starts happening that Amber actually is Midge, or that's what we're led to believe. And then at another point, I guess, in the second season, just to explain this a little bit better, Amber was created um, in place of Midge, I guess. So Midge, when she comes back was it the end of the first season, the beginning of the second season, in one of the episodes where she comes back, I guess her body was, um, again, I don't really know how to explain this, but she comes back to life somehow through the means of this thing called Ammocine, which I'm not exactly sure. They didn't really explain enough what it did, but I guess it has effects on people who aren't supposed to take it. Like it makes them see figures and stuff, and so on and so forth, like ghosts that were on the island. So, again, I don't really feel like that was explained too well either, but I guess the ghosts could lead you to what was supposed to be. Like they could lead you in certain directions, and I guess show you the way around the island, I guess essentially was maybe their purpose. Again, a lot of this was kind of confusing to me, but that was a lot of what the second season was, and then a lot of people were coming back. Um, like Luca got, um, I believe he explained it in the first season, Luca, where he ended up getting captured by the guy that he thought he had killed in the first season. So again, so much is happening and so many different storylines. And Mia finds Luca in the first season, and he seems to be like this lone survivor, but he doesn't he doesn't have any memory of why he's on the island either. And it was kind of took away from the rest of the show as far as I was concerned, because I was like, he kind of seemed like a secondary character, and then they tried to make him into like one of the main characters in the second season. And I was like, this just isn't working, because he kind of just like all of a sudden appears in the story, and it was very odd that he wasn't with the rest of the group and then tried to escape. But I don't think he was even part of the group like beforehand when Amber showed up originally. So uh, I'm not really sure why he was even there, to be completely honest. Like, was he already on the island before any of that had happened the first year? And then he was just kind of surviving off of them that time around too, and then they came back and he just took advantage of it again. Like, I'm not entirely sure, because I don't remember him ever being like a part of the group, uh, other than Mia finding him in the forest and using him to find this uh, communication spot so she could call her parents and try to get off of the island. But uh, yeah, everything seems to kind of be like a hallucination almost, except for um, what happens in the camp, because Amber can control so much. Like, she's trying to take away everybody's pain and so on and so forth, and promising all these things to them. And that just wasn't really the case at all. She was just trying to get back at Mia for, I guess, the competition in the very beginning of the movie, where Amber tries to make it look like Mia let her fall or whatever. And I was like, okay, this is getting really goofy. And then, of course, the whole party scene where they're supposed to be like partying at night and it's like the middle of the afternoon. And there's like this small group of like maybe 11 or 12 people dancing around. And I was like, okay, this is just so weird. I don't know where this show was going. The writing, it wasn't written well, and a lot of the acting wasn't that great. But I mean, they had a story there. There was a story there, but it just seemed like it was kind of all over the place. And then, of course, Midge coming back, and then all of a sudden, Midge was looked what looked like she was like the good guy, right? She defeats Amber, and then Amber somehow breaks out of her spell, and of course, Amber's powers aren't as strong anymore. And then uh, Midge starts becoming the bad guy because of what Mia had done to her. I guess Mia and her had grown up together, and I was like, okay, why are we getting this sort of weird backstory now? Like, it would have been enough for Midge to come back and try to get revenge on everybody, just based on the fact that they kind of left her out of everything in the camp alone, and came back and tried to get revenge on everybody a year later, once she was once she was found alive, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like, they played the game, she fell, she was killed, so like whatever. But I guess she actually did die. So they were now Mia's trying to like free her completely from the island. It was just so weird. And then her mom, of course, was saying that she was destroying whatever like body was left of her now. Um, Basically, the Amosine was slowly killing her. So they had taken everybody to this Lockwell Institute, and they were basically trapping them there and trying to make it seem like everything that they thought had happened on this island didn't actually happen, but in turn, this Lockwell Institute was just trying to keep them, away from what had been taking place on the island, I guess. So, yeah, they search for Midge. They eventually find her, I guess, or find her, or find a piece of her, I guess. Like, at least her body and her memories seem to be there. But then she starts taking everybody's power, and she kills a bunch of them. Um, like, I think uh, I think Zach dies, Petal dies. Like, she kills quite a few people before she finally, realizes that everything she's doing is wrong, and she doesn't want to do what she's doing, but I mean, the damage has already been done by that point, right? So it was just, yeah, this whole show kind of eventually just found its story in the second season, but it was already a little too late because the first season seemed so back and forth as to where they really wanted to go with the show. And then, of course, the whole lab incident and the camp counselors trying to keep the peace in any way they could. And yeah, again, it just wasn't that great of a storyline in the first season, I found, and it kind of, found its footing, I guess, a little bit in the second season. But again, it was just very weird, and kind of like all these storylines trying to connect together. And then, everybody that seemingly had their memories back all of a sudden wanted to be taken control of again. And I was like, why? Like, you are remembering what you had before, but yet you still want to go back and just be brainwashed. It didn't really make a whole, like, it was a weak selling point that Amber kept kind of winning in the first season, and Mia just couldn't do anything about it. And then in the second season, Amber decides to help Mia, and then Amber ends up being the one that lives on anyway, and Mia dies twice. I was like, okay, or not Mia, sorry, Midge dies twice. So I was like, okay, why did we even bring Midge back if she wasn't going to be able to even defeat anybody or at least live her own life again. It was just so weird. Um, and at one point, it almost seemed like Amber and Midge were going to team up, and I'm not really sure whether they were supposed to be sisters or like Amber was created in a lab and then eventually becomes human. Like it was kind of confusing as to that too. But anyway, definitely won't be watching this show again. Um, so yeah, it was kind of a painful watch at certain points, but I mean, I guess not every show that I've ever had on my list is going to be enjoyable to me, right? I never know going into it what it's going to be like. So it looked good from the trailers, but it was definitely way different than I thought it was going to be. Uh, unless I'm thinking of a different show that I had on my list that I thought was this one. But anyway, this was not at all where I thought this show was going, and yeah, it just threw me for a loop, and didn't enjoy it that much. 4 out of 10, and I guess I will see you guys in the next review. Bye bye for now.